and I felt a part of that family. And for me, I think going to Notre Dame on that trip, it reminded me of De La Salle. So it felt familiar. It felt home. There was this, standard that people were talking about that you would hear Holtz and some of the other players, the Tony Rices that were up speaking that night at the banquet that we all went to. It felt familiar. And I think ultimately that's probably why I ended up graduating from there.
Fantastic, fantastic. And I know you took that work ethic. I had the unfortunate task of going against you every day for 3 years, and all the time had to work with it. And I know I saw you battle through shoulder injuries and different things of that nature. You were never really the physique workout dude, but you just were like Mr. Feet and Hands or whatever. So I know you worked yourself into 2-time All-American. You get through, you win the Lombardi Award. You're coming out. Talk to us about your draft day experience.
Well, I want to pause him real quickly because I just, jumping forward or jumping backwards, every freshman, sophomore, junior has that breakthrough moment when they become part of the integral part of the team. What year was your part where you knew that? I think it was early too, because in our class, there were certain guys that broke out early, Lake, Jerome, Greg Lane. But were you one of those guys that broke out early, and what year was that?
For me, I think I'd worked my way up to quote-unquote second team. I think that was more to put pressure on the fifth-year senior in front of me, Winston Landry, that Coach Moore was trying to mess with. But I think our first spring that we were there, our freshman year, when it looked like I was the guy that was going to be slated at that right or that left guard position, Tim Ruddy was going to start, and was in that mix. So I think for me, that's really where it emerged. And it went from being, hey, an idea like, man, it'd be great to play big time college football to, holy shit, I might have an opportunity to do this in like for real. And I think for me, that's where it kicked in. And just that bonding, it's different, man. Like people don't understand when you're on a team, everybody's a part of it. But like when you're a guy that's on film and has responsibilities, to your point, like there is this graduation, this maturation, this stepping forward where it's like, damn, this is my deal. Like I'm part of this team. Right. And I think for me, it was then, and it took all of us. But I think by our sophomore year, man, half of us were starting. And by our junior, almost everybody was starting or playing or contributing to some standpoint. That fateful summer that you and Jim Flanagan came back about 320 and benching 550 in 6 weeks. To play D-line, both you guys, like
a race to a heart attack. Yeah.
Oh my God. But we all figured it out, man. So I think for me, it was that that spring of my freshman year was really where my nuts dropped.
Right. Now, one more thing, and I'm glad you hit on it. You mentioned Joe Moore. Mm-hmm. Tell us about the special relationship you had with Coach Moore, because you then went to inspire his award, and I wasn't going to say anything, but Joe Moore was my guy. Every time I got kicked out of a meeting, I came to your meeting because Coach Moore understood. So tell us about a little bit about you and your relationship with Joe Moore.
Yeah, Joe Moore was a Pied Piper of misfits, man. He would take all comers, and if you couldn't make it at the O-line, like it was D-line, O-line, bus line. If you couldn't make it in our room, there was no room for you on a football team. Right. But he was masterful, man, at getting us to be the best versions of ourselves. And he had some old school blue collar ways of doing that. There were some eye rakes and some gut punches and some mother scratches.
Some cigarettes smoked on the practice field.
Cigarette burns,
in practice fields, we were in meetings and couldn't see. I'm surprised we all don't have secondhand smoke. We should all probably go get tested for lung cancer as much as he chain smoked. But you got to give him this, man. He was an unbelievable teacher, and he simplified the complex. And he would break down, I remember the first meeting, he would break down what a run block was. And he's like, you guys ever push a car in the snow? I was from Cali. I hadn't, but you push a car, yeah? Do you do it like this with your hands on the hood and all high and chopping your feet pitter-patter? Or do you get underneath with your elbows in and stay tight and drive your legs? It was like, boom, okay. Now I know what it is I'm trying to do. Now you and Bryant and Reggie and a lot of the other D linemen we had, weren't about getting blocks, so we had to work. But at least conceptually, I knew what it was I was trying to do, and then we just repped the shit out of it. It was repetition, repetition, repetition. And the result of that for him over an 18-year career between Pitt and Notre Dame was he sent 52 dudes at least for a cup of coffee to the NFL. That's almost 3 per year.
I'm sorry, I apologize. I saw some stat where I was coaching at a camp later, and it's like Joe Moore never had an All-American that did not play in the NFL. It was something crazy like that.
Right. You never had like a senior starter, I think it was. Never had a senior starter that didn't play in the NFL.
So stop and think about that. And Joe, in the scouting circles, people started being down on his guys because they never got better. They were as good as they were ever going to get in most cases once they left Notre Dame.
Wow.
And he it was almost a bad thing towards the end if you became a Joe Moore guy, because people had questions about what your potential and your development could be. And OG, I know you played in Pittsburgh, man. He is loved in that city. He is synonymous with that. So we go back every summer, and there's an O-line camp there in his honor. But he touched a lot of us, man, and he taught me that I was capable of doing a hell of a lot more than I thought I was. And there was no other way for it to happen than the way that he taught all of us to do that. And that's really what the Joe Moore Award's about, is celebrating toughness and teamwork, which are the basis of the sport of football and purportedly for our country. But we can get to that in another time.
Right. I had the pleasure of going out with Coach Moore when I was in Pittsburgh, because Coach Moore understood me when I was at Notre Dame. I had a propensity to get in a couple of skirmishes. And Coach Turgovac, Mike Turgovac, our coach, would always kick me out of meetings. And I would just come to the back of your room, and he's like, "What happened? You got kicked out again?" "Yep." "All right, we'll just sit there and don't make any noise." And then also, when I get to the facility early, there was like that 2 to 3 o'clock spell. I'd have to go to the football office to just kind of chill out. And I would literally go in Coach Moore's office and fall asleep on that little wooden couch he had, just because I knew that was the one person that Holtz was not going to visit. You know what I mean? I knew Holtz wasn't coming in there. So I'd pull my head down and I would sleep while Coach Moore, you guys came in and out or whatever. So he was a great guy to me. I love the man. And I think he deserves every award that the award that you put in his honor. That's a hell of a thing, man. Reg, go ahead.
So how many years have you guys had that Coach Moore Award now?
We just celebrated our 5th year. LSU won it last year. Those guys brought some physicality to pass pro.
Explain the award.
So the Joe Moore Award is the only group or team award in college football, and it goes to the most outstanding offensive line unit, so tackle to tackle. So there's 25 other college football awards, obviously the Heisman maybe being the most recognizable, but ironically, all of those celebrate the individual. Well, we know that football is a team sport, so we felt it was fitting to create an award to honor the sport's greatest coach on the collegiate level to ever exist, with something that celebrated the room. And it didn't matter, to your point, if you were a D lineman, got kicked out, you were welcome. If you were an All-American, you got coached a certain way. If you were a walk-on, you got coached a certain way. And the expectation was, whatever it is you have to bring to the table, you better bring it. So a dude that's stiff, that doesn't have any athleticism, was coached just as hard as Tim Ruddy or Tim Grunhard. So those are the things that the award celebrates. It's the principles of toughness, the principles of teamwork. It's about being together. It's about being accountable. It's about putting the greater good above ourselves. It's about all those things that I think symbolically the offensive line represents. And I'll tell you what, we have created an award that means something to the O-line community, particularly on the college level. Like, the give a shit factor is high for these guys. They finally have something to play for. Not that we needed anything before it, but it's an honor. And you look at the teams that have won it in Alabama, in Iowa, in Notre Dame, in LSU, and Oklahoma. Those are some blue blood programs that have a long history of the O-line position. So it's been a lot of fun. We're only 5 years into it, but we have very quickly become one of the most respected college football awards in its history.
How do you guys go about choosing it and doing it? Is there like a big committee? And talk us through that.
Yeah, man. So when we started out, is like, well, how are we going to evaluate this deal, right? So I knew it was important that it was a collective voice, and I wanted to create that ownership right out of the gate. So I reached out to probably 800 to 1,000 combined years of O-line playing and coaching experience, both on the college and the NFL level. And I said, break down for me the top 3 characteristics of the best offensive lines you ever played for or were ever a part of. So I got all these responses back, and it was almost like kind of creating a word cloud. Things just kept popping. And, first and foremost was toughness. Then there was effort. Then there was teamwork. Then there was consistency. Then there was technique. And then finally finishing, right? So I kind of had to distill all that. That whole process took about 3 or 4 months, but it's those 6 criteria that we use. And those aren't mine. Those are the collective conscience of a bunch of dudes that played the sport for a long ass time. And then we just watch the film, man. I got a committee of about 13 guys. It's a who's who of offensive linemen within the media space in college football. Guys have to play or have coached the position to vote on it, so it's not a popularity award. And we watch film, man. We watch cut-ups, and it's a labor of love. It takes a long-ass time. But as you guys know, playing against us, it's all in the details. You got to watch the film to the end to see the guy with a reach block and try and tip somebody over and do all the dirty stuff that we do. We put a high value on that. So the only way you can do that is by watching the actual tape. You can't go to the stat box and say that somebody ran for 300 yards, that they're going to be a good offensive line, because it could be a completely empty box, with 5 or 6 guys in there with 3-foot splits. That doesn't mean as much as watching a Stanford do what they do, or watching a Notre Dame do what they did with Bud Glinchey and Quentin Nelson and those sort of things. So it's a hefty evaluation process, but I put our process in the octagon with anybody. Like, we do the work, and we've been right so far.
Okay. Another thing I wanted, Reggie alluded to it earlier. He was talking about draft day. And what's funny is, I don't know if you remember this, but remember when you and BY went to go pick up both of your cars and you guys took me? Mm-hmm. And I was hanging back. I was so jealous. You got the blue joint, or B had the blue one, you had the green joint, whatever. And then you got drafted, which was, you're my dude. I was happy for you. But then you had a somewhat tumultuous first training camp. Tell that story.
So I was supposed to be, first of all, 4th or 5th overall, 5th or 6th overall, Tampa the Rams. They both needed a tackle. I played left tackle my senior year at Notre Dame from a right-hand stance because I was never comfortable left tackle. What I know now about draft evaluation, I didn't have the length or the athleticism to even think about playing that. I didn't know that, but a lot of other teams did, which is why I fell to 16 and Green Bay drafted me for some hotshot quarterback they had named Brett Favre. What you're alluding to was we were in our underwear, man, in mini camps, now called OTAs, and doing one-on-ones. And y'all would appreciate this. A D lineman maybe going a little bit harder than he should have with no pads on, bull rushed me. So I went to sink, and boom, I blew out my right patella tendon. Now, mind you, I had never missed a down in college. Now, I wasn't necessarily durable, but I was tough as hell. So I was able to play through injuries. Reggie, you alluded to my shoulder. But I had never had anything like that happen to me. And like, my world stopped, and it's the classic story we've all seen in football. My world stopped. They moved the drill 10 yards and kept going, didn't skip a beat. And that was the moment that I realized that football was a fickle foe. Like, it wasn't personal. And I was essentially loving a game that didn't love me back. And that would, play itself out later on in my career, particularly when I retired. But it got real dark for me on that day. It was June 6, 1994, I think at 10:32 a.m. Not that I remember what that moment was like, but I remember looking down and looking at my quad had lollipopped up to the middle of my leg because my quad wasn't attached to nothing. And it made a real loud pop, and it hurt, but didn't like really, really hurt. Like, I've broken bones and rolled ankles that probably hurt more than this. I was like, I was scared. And the orthopedic surgeon runs over, and it's a first-round draft pick, clearly blown something out. They didn't know what it was immediately. And the doc runs over, and it's Pat McKenzie, who's a big Notre Dame fan. I was like, shoot me straight, doc. Is it bad? He's like, hell yeah, it's bad. You're done for the year. And I just remember, like, all my shit went.
Right.
Now, you got to keep in mind now, from the time I was a little boy, dreaming about playing in the league and everything that took place and not doing anything to earn that, but then about my junior year getting to De La Salle and working and all the doubts I had to overcome there and all the hard work, and then getting to Notre Dame and doing that grind, like, everything pointed to this one moment, and the floor fell out in an instant on day 4 before I even put shoulder pads on. So that was a rough go. And y'all know how it is, man. Like, they close ranks and march on, and it ain't personal, but you become invisible, man. And people don't understand the burden that puts on your mental health. And certainly for me, so I did what I do best, which was start drinking, and probably drank for 10 straight years after that, trying to get myself out of that hole.
Right. Man, I can appreciate that. Obviously, I had similar things in college where you think, you get in there. Mine came a little earlier, but that whole life goes on, and the fact that, like, okay, you're no longer relevant now. You got to keep moving. Things are going to go forward with or without you, especially in the NFL where they're like somebody else is like, hell yeah. You know what I mean? Unfortunately, your tragedy was somebody else's opportunity, so they kind of come up and they keep working through there. So you're out that season. How much longer? When were you able to come back and get back to form?
Well, add an insult to injury is that when I went down the next day, they brought in Guy McIntyre, who was one of my players that I watched growing up in the Bay Area with the San Francisco 49ers. So I'm like, not only am I not playing, but they bringing in a dude I watched as a kid play my position. Like, it was just a dagger in the heart. But I worked my ass off and came back that next year, played, I think, in the last preseason game, played the entire season, and then boom, go down at the end of my second year, same injury, other leg. And what I know now is I was overcompensating, putting too much pressure on there because I had tendonitis on the other quad that wasn't strong enough to have come back and just kind of degenerated over the course of the season. But y'all remember Jumpy Geathers in that forklift. I got my ass forklift right to the ER room and had surgery that next day on, I think it was New Year's Eve after the swelling had went down. So I had two major blowouts in my first 2 years in the NFL. And at that time, nobody had ever come back from two ruptured patella tendons. So I thought it was a wrap for me. So things that started out dark my rookie year got quite a bit darker after my second year in Green Bay. But luckily, I came back, stayed healthy that third year. We go to the Super Bowl and win it. So I think we know what the secret weapon was. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Give credit where credit is due.
It was me. It was me.
It's all you. It was all you.
It's me.
All right. So it's funny because I experienced a season-ending Achilles tear, and the one thing that you do find out is what life is like.
Pause, guys. The pause for a second. The connection's getting really bad. Go ahead, talk again.
One thing you do realize once you get injured, is that there is life without football because that's so much of who you are. Now, one of the most interesting stories about you is not only your 6-7 year NFL career. Not only was it the Lombardi Trophy and all your accomplishments in college, but you became a bit of a Renaissance man. And you had one of the most unusual transitions I have ever heard after football. And I remember one time you came to Chicago and you told me the whole story. And I'm like, man, I had no idea. And I think those injuries taught you to be that person. Tell us about, after you got out of football, exactly what path that you took.
Well, we just talked about the Super Bowl that we won. We went to back-to-back Super Bowls, but we lost Super Bowl 32 in San Diego against the Denver Broncos. But I had an opportunity to finish my career here and play 2 years with the Chargers before hanging it up. And I remember, man, when I shut it down, I was sitting up on the dais, and it was me and Charles Demery. For those that remember him, he was a cornerback. First started out in Tampa, and we shut it down on the same day and had a joint press conference. And I remember this overwhelming sense of, what's that?
You said that you had a joint or a joint press conference? I'm just joking.
A joint press conference. I was smoking a lot of joints back then, too.
In San Diego. Right.
In San Diego. We got that good herb, boy. We're not that far from Mexico. It's that good stuff.
Right.
I digress. So we had this press conference. I remember feeling overwhelmingly relieved, thank God I ain't got to do that anymore in terms of dealing with the pain and the shots and the pills and the pressure and the bullshit. And I was more relieved that it was over with because I was banged up, man. I remember, I think my second year, I was with the Chargers. We had played a like opponent. So all my buddies back in Green Bay were watching the San Diego Chargers offense for a common opponent that they were coming up playing. They were like, all right, settle the score. We counted 13 braces. How many are you actually wearing? And I think it was 13. Everything was going wrong and breaking down. So I was happy to retire, man. I thought I was going to hunt and fish and play golf and, whatever retirement looks like to you at 28 years old, that's what I thought I was going to do.
Right.
And very quickly, man, it got dark and the realization, almost like being hurt, was like, damn, I've kind of always been what I've always done. I've never really thought about who I'm going to be now that I'm not doing this thing. I know who AT was and the left guard, the Lombardi Award winner, but who was Aaron? I didn't know, man. I had never spent any time figuring that out. So it took me about 2 years to crash and burn. if there was a mind-altering substance, I put it into my body in mass quantities. I like what I like, and there's no off switch, there's no medium, there was no moderation. So that took about 2 years to where I had to figure things out. So
keep in mind, kids, he's not a role model.
I'm a coping role model at this point, and certainly a recovering one. Right. But alcoholism and drug abuse runs in my family, particularly on my dad's side, and I got those genes and that bug. But I think more than anything, man, I was trying to fill a void inside of me, and I didn't know what that looked like. So to your point, being a Renaissance man, after I got out of my own way and got sober, it was like, let me go explore the world. And that's what I did, man. I taught English in South America for 6 months, which was really a way for me to learn and kind of finally lock in Spanish.
After the tsunami.
I went to the tsunami in Sri Lanka. I went to Europe and did 8 months or six to 8 weeks there backpacking by myself and just bought a Eurail pass and like spent some time with me. And there was a lot of stuff I found I didn't like, but there was a lot of stuff that I did as well. So I ended up going back to grad school and getting my teaching credential and thought I was going to teach elementary school. But then TV came calling. So
well, weren't you, wait, hold on, back up. Weren't you a kindergarten teacher at one point?
Second grade. Second grade. But I student taught second grade. And I was gonna be a teacher. I got my credential. I'd done my student teacher. I had the piece of paper in my hand. The only thing from preventing me from going to teach elementary school, besides good judgment, was a resume and an interview. So that's right when ABC called, and I did that halftime show on ABC with Craig James and a very good friend of mine, John Saunders, who passed away a while back. But let me pause you because you're skipping part of your story. The reason why I remember this story is because when I was in Chicago and you came to my crib you were in town for business, you actually told a part of the story that I thought was really, really funny and ironic. Apparently, you had told me that for a while, you took a job at a restaurant. Yes.
In which you're driving a Mercedes that costs more than the owner of the restaurant's vehicle, and you're the maitre d' making whatever minimum wage was at the time, probably $8 an hour. Tell that story.
A lot of people had a lot of questions about what the hell I was doing, man. I had a buddy of mine named Pasquale that owned a popular restaurant in La Jolla at the time. And I love to cook and I love people. So, hey, open a restaurant. That makes sense, right? Like no athletes ever thought of that before. Yeah. So Pasquale, to his credit, was like, Aaron, I can't let you do that shit, Aaron. You don't want to be in this business. If you want to be in the business and open up a restaurant, you got to come work for me and see what it's like. So no problem. He said, I'm going to make you a server. You're going to have to serve food and learn this business from the bottom up. If you're willing to do that, then I'll teach you the hustle. It's like, all right.
Former Lombardi trophy winner, former 6-7 year NFL vet, former NFL Super Bowl champion is.
Would you like fries with that?
Exactly.
Right. That's the irony.
So, there was a lot of cats that were curious about what I was doing because I also had a post-game Chargers show. I was on TV at the time, and I would show up valet park at like 11 o'clock to go wait tables for the lunch shift and make, $42 in tips. It wouldn't even cost what the valet cost, and people were like scratching their head. And I'll never forget, there was this one guy that came in and was like, hey, aren't you Aaron Taylor? I was like, yeah. He's like, Didn't you play at Notre Dame? I was like, yeah. I was like, you graduated from there, right? Didn't I read that right? I was like, yeah. He's like, then you played in the NFL first round draft pick? I was like, yeah. He's like, and you do TV now? Yeah. You won a Super Bowl? Yeah. And he's like, why are you working here? And I was like, I want to learn the business. And I think it was real hard for people to understand or even make sense of the fact that because of all the things I'd done and monies that I had made at that time and those things, that I would humble myself. But I was bored, man. I didn't know what the hell I wanted to do. Opening a restaurant sounded like a good idea, but I didn't know shit about it. So I went to people that did, and his suggestion, it was a guy that I trusted, was like, you need to come learn the business. And what I learned there is when I would work a dinner shift and I would leave and pull out of there at 11:30 and come back and work a lunch shift the next day, Pasquale was there at 11:30 and didn't leave till 1. And when I showed back up at 11 to work lunch, he had been there since 8:30. Right. So it became a labor of love. And he's like, you know what, AT? I do this for $85,000 a year. That's what I make. That's what I get to keep. Everything else goes out the door. Are you sure you want to be in this business? And I knew he was successful. And I was like, Nope. And from then on, I never even entertained investing or opening a restaurant because I had learned a little bit about what it was about.
Right. So now we transition to your teaching experience. And like you said, you were teaching kids English after the tsunami hit. One of the things that I was always a little bit jealous of you is one day I'm in Miami getting fat, my post-football career, and ABC College Sports comes on. And who is sitting next to Craig James? Aaron has managed to Forrest Gump his way into broadcasting. Only Aaron. Tell that story.
But Aaron, weren't you in broadcasting before you did the teaching thing? Did you start that and then you left the broadcasting, right? You had gotten a gig and at least put a year in, and then you went off and did a lot of that stuff, correct?
I was on local TV in San Diego. Then I left and I believe went down to South America, enjoyed teaching, came back, had done a bunch of philanthropic stuff. And to OG's, he characterized it perfectly. Forrest Gumped my way onto that desk. I had no business being at that desk. It was like a movie star being discovered that's an actress on Monday, and by Friday she's cast as the leading role of some, Emmy award-winning film. Like, it just, what happened to me doesn't happen, especially nowadays, even with all the platforms we have. But I was at the right place at the right time and had taken Craig James' broadcasting boot camp that he had way back in the day. And because of that relationship, I was able to get the gig. I had natural rapport and chemistry. Now, mind you, I didn't know shit about college football and hadn't watched it in 10 years, since I got into the NFL. But I was smart enough to fake it till I made it and had a little bit of a rapport with those cats. And John Saunders, man, bless his heart, he's if they make better people than him, I'd like to meet him. But he was really helpful in kind of helping me navigate that. And I'll tell you this story, man. We were coming back from commercial one time, and like things changed. And at ABC back then, we were the halftime show, but we'd have 3 different games going in the noon window, then the 3:30 window, then we'd have a primetime window. So we might go back-to-back segments talking about the Florida State Clemson game, but then go to the Midwest and have some Big Ten game, and it moved really quick. And John's job was to make sure that we knew what was going on in direct traffic. And it came fast to me, and I was making fun of John about doing something, and I completely botched something. And we go to commercials, like, shit, right? Like, thank God social media wasn't around, or I would have got crushed for whatever it was I did. It was like a big mistake. And John looked at me, he was like, the young bucks learning that there's a big difference between understanding football and bringing it to life on television. Right. And like, we had a good chuckle about it, but that was the way, a lot like Holtz, he would teach and kind of let you know what it is you needed to know. But then after that, come and be like, hey, the next time that happens, we'll do this, and I'll come to you like that, blah, 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 blah. And we worked it out, and that particular issue was never an issue again. But like, for me to even be sitting in that seat, man, it's like starting on the varsity team as a true freshman when you can't bench 135 pounds. Like, it made no sense that I was there, yet somehow I ended up being there. And that led to a lot of things in the career that I have now that's, year 13 and counting, assuming we have a football season this year, which I don't think we'll have, but we're going to talk about that later.
Inshallah.
For sure. I remember one time sitting in the bed, it's like 2 a.m, I can't sleep, and I'm watching World's Strongest Man, and I hear his voice. I'm like, coming from China. Blah, blah, blah. I was like, is that Aaron Taylor?
Yeah, you on ESPN Ocho.
No. AT is on ESPN doing the World's Strongest Man. What was that like, man? Did you get into it, or was it just something to do, or what?
It's the caveman Olympics, man. Like, these dudes is big ass dudes lifting big ass things, and it's cartoonish strong, man. So Hathor Julius Bjornsson, who was the Mountain on the Game of Thrones, for the people that watched that series, he was there. They got this guy Brian Shaw, who's an American, like 6'8", 420, and not fat, like yoked, jacked. So to have an opportunity, I think we had it for 6 years. Our broadcast team had it for 6 years. I watched that as a kid, man. I remember Brent Musburger calling it, and the dudes on the refrigerator carry, he hyperextended and blew out his knee, and it was all like a stork. It bent the wrong way, and Brent's like, uh-oh, there appears to be a problem on lane 2. Mind you, a boy's jug is all twisted up. But That was fun, man. We got to go to China, we got to go to Malaysia, we got to go to Africa a couple times. That was the only time I've been to the African continent. Went to Botswana, which is the highest concentration of wildlife on the African continent, which was a line that I said about 17,000 times in the show, which is why I remember it. But it was a great experience. Probably in TV, that's the most fun I've ever had, because you were just reacting to what it is you saw. And when there's a cat on rep 17 of 800-pound squat, like, you can't believe what you're seeing. When you're watching guys pull C-130 airplanes for time, when you're watching guys, shoulder pressing Jeeps and things above their head, it's like, what are these dudes doing? Right. So it was fun, man. And some of the stuff that happened behind the scenes was just as fun as what happened on camera. So that's over for us with CBS. I think we still have the property and other teams doing it. But like that, to your point, man, Forrest Gump, like I might be the Black Forrest Gump. I end up at the right place at the right time in almost every area of my life, man.
You do, and it's funny because you paid me the greatest compliment / insult, which I was scarred at because it was funny at the time. I remember I was playing basketball and I was running for like student body president or something like that. And I was playing football and you said, OG, I respect what you do, but you are a jack of all trades and a master of none. And I was like, you son of a... You were a jerk in college. I'm just going to tell you. You were the original college bully, but it's all good. It motivated me to be like, yeah, I'll show him. I'll show them all. You know what I mean? So I appreciate that inadvertent motivation, you mother sucker. But anyway.
Just know this, OG. Hurting people hurt people, bro. I was in a bad place in college.
Okay.
Bad place in college.
All right. I take it because I've said some crude stuff too, so it's all good. We're grown. But
anyway. Grown man. But like, it was ironic, man. Like, I'm a jack of all trades, master of none. Like, I know a little bit about a lot of stuff, but I don't know everything about anything.
But here's what your level of intelligence, and that's one thing I've always respected you and most of my classmates at Notre Dame. You fake it better than anybody I've ever met. Because when you were on ABC, when I saw you when I was down in Miami getting fat, I'm like, I don't really think somebody must have just Aaron at that DC score, because he was never a sports guy like that. But you were always so polished, and you were smart enough to take, I think, sociology classes, and you were like an academic All-American or something like that. So I'm choosing econ, but you're taking sociology classes, and you're getting A's and B's and A's and B's, and I'm getting my C's, and I'm like, who's the smarter man?
Yeah, you class smart. I was street smart, OG. I chose sociology.
Super smart. Super smart.
If you can see,
I think you had to. You always had that confidence about yourself, so you went through. So it wasn't really surprising to see you out there, because you sound today on this podcast the same way on shows, the same way you sound if I were to give you a call. I mean, you got the same sort of presence about yourself and speak with confidence to kind of make things go. So I'm not too surprised about that. So moving along, as you alluded to a second ago with sports, I mean, so now obviously you've been out there, you've been watching what's going on. What do you think? Do you think we're going to have a season? Do you think it's prudent to even try? Asking these guys to put themselves at risk? What's your thoughts?
It's interesting, man. We've been spending, and we're July 19th, I think, right now as we tape this. We've been spending so much time on how we can bring football back that I don't think we spend as much time or enough time on discussing whether or not if football should come back. College football's got a real problem. I don't predict that we're going to play this season at all. We're going to try to. It's going to be at the 11th hour that the last people are going to tap out. But when you have a precedent set by the Ivy League and by Harvard and by the Patriot League and these lower levels that are very highly respected institutions of higher learning, it puts a lot of pressure on the other schools and the Power Five and the football blue bloods, because it forces the ADs and the chancellors and the presidents of those other schools to answer this question. Two questions, really. How can we have college football without college? And how, if one of the leading institutions of higher learning in the world, if their medical staff has deemed it unsafe, being the Ivy League, to play football in the fall, help us to understand why you believe it's safe. At the athletic level, like the quality of football at Harvard and the Ivy League isn't comparable to what we're seeing at Clemson or LSU or Alabama or some of the big boys. So the answer to that question is money. Everybody knows it's money. And at the end of the day, it's either going to be litigation or the threat of litigation that is going to force, unfortunately, college football, because that directly impacts my paycheck, to sit out this season. Push to the spring, I think, is the best case scenario, but we might miss an entire cycle of this thing, which is going to cause a ton of problems. But here's the thing, boys. The intercollegiate athletics and the institution of higher learning bubble just burst. It was out of control. COVID was the pin, but it wasn't the problem. COVID burst the bubble. But what caused the bubble was out of control spending, exponential increases in salaries for coaches, the arms race for facilities so that they can keep up with the Joneses and attract kids. And at the end of the day, I'm not sending my kids to Notre Dame for $50,000 a year to get a sociology degree. It's just add a line for what you get for what it is you given, and that's across the board. So I think we're seeing a great reset on the collegiate level. Athletics is going to lead it, but it's going to affect everybody. And I think the economic contagion at the end of the day is going to be quite a bit worse than the biological one, which has already killed several 100,000 people.
Okay, well, that gives me a chance to ask you somewhat of an expert question. Do college sports programs live season to season like some families live check to check? And can college football on the whole, especially Division I, afford to take a season off? Or will that kill programs? Are they going to start pulling back scholarships? My son is a scholarship football player at an FCS school, Southern Illinois, go Salukis. And I'm just like, man, I don't know if Salukis, it's a dog. How does that affect the economic ramifications of going without one season where they already spent all this money to, like you said, get these new facilities? They've already put the money out there. I mean, can college football financially survive that, in your opinion?
No. And that's what's scary. And you've hit the nail on the head for me. I think lost in all this discussion is the fact that you have these universities, some of which have $100 million or more budgets. Ohio State's is $200 million a year, that are living paycheck to paycheck. And what we're watching take place in collegiate athletics is what we saw in the real estate industry and housing in 2008. Everybody was spending so much money. Every bartender you knew got their real estate license, and it was the rolling 2000s. We were all making money, and then the music stopped, and there was not enough chairs for everybody. There's not going to be enough chairs for these college programs that have spent so much money that never once even stopped to think about to do a stress test, a tail risk event to evaluate, if we didn't play, what would that look like? So even a place like Harvard or Stanford that's got, 50 million and 25 or 50 billion, $25 billion respectively endowment, right. They can't bail them out. Those are allocated dollars that can't help athletics, which is why Stanford let 11 of their 36 varsity programs go, which is a third of their varsity sports.
Wow.
This is gonna wipe some people out. And the big boys have the best chance to navigate it, but nobody's ever planned for this, which is why they're trying so hard to play in the first place. Even if it's 4 games, that's better for them, because at this point, schools are already $70+ million in the hole just from basketball not getting played. So the economic ramifications of this, I'll use the word catastrophic. Nobody's ever even thought about that. Nobody's got a plan for that, which is why they're putting all their eggs in the basket of trying to play football this fall. But ultimately, I'm afraid for all of us, that ain't going to happen.
Is that going to affect, in your opinion, Title IX with women's equality when it comes to sports? Or are they just going to say, look, we got to keep our moneymakers, football and basketball? Sorry, ladies.
No, you can't, because Title IX is federal legislation. They would love to do that. We can get into the systemic racism, systemic sexism of athletics on another show, but the bottom line is their hands forced because Title IX is federal legislation. So what that means is football is the tide that raises all boats. If that tide goes out, every boat is on the ground. Like if football doesn't get played, nothing gets played. Wow. And that's what people need to understand, is why people are working so hard to try to justify putting these players and coaches at risk when everybody across the board outside of sports is not doing that. With our children in the state of California, we're not doing that. We can argue whether COVID's a hoax or not, whether wearing a mask is an infringement upon our constitutional freedoms or not. You can take all that and argue either side of it. What I'm saying is sports, because of how poorly they've run their economic households, are forced to try to find a way to make it work, because they don't have an answer economically if it doesn't.
Wow.
That's a scary, scary scene.
Yes, it are,
Unfortunately,
especially for the cat that earns a living and gets paid to talk about college football. If that don't happen, now guess who's filing for unemployment?
Mm-hmm. Right. Guess who's filing for student loans for my son? So I feel you.
So it's interesting, man. In the
Yeah.
NFL, the players, had a coordinated social media campaign today trying to put pressure to have the NFL step up and have some sort of baseline minimum care as a standards. We're going to learn a lot from baseball that just started playing. We're going to learn a lot from the NBA. But at the end of the day, football is a contact sport. And if it's droplets that are spreading the disease, like, here's the thing, the COVID, if you're 80 and have diabetes, that could be a death sentence for you. If you're our age and have no pre-existing comorbidities, you're probably going to be all right. Who's a healthier population than 18 to 22-year-olds that are out there playing in college or in the NFL being a little bit older, right? These guys are in great shapes, but so their chances are small, but their chances of fatality are not zero. And when you look at the numbers, there will probably be an NFL player or a college player, particularly on college because of the population side, that dies as a result of being exposed to COVID-19 that maybe has sickle cell or has asthma or pre-diabetic that's not diagnosed. So it begs the question, what's the risk that you're willing to take to play a sport for economic reasons? And can you afford to be wrong? And when that answer is deaths, that's going to be real hard for chancellors and presidents of universities to justify. And ultimately, I think that's going to be when the cooler heads prevail. But man, it ain't going to be pretty. And I'm predicting that we don't get football on the collegiate level. The NFL is going to try to bulldoze their way through and try. But you can't put a bubble around the sport of football just by the nature of the way that it's played.
Too many people, yeah.
So the
NBA is going to give us a chance right now. They're going to kick that thing off. You think that'll be successful, or you think that'll give us a false sense of security?
Yeah, I think it'd be a little bit of a false sense of security because to the NBA's credit, they're spending $150 million to create a bubble, and they're making sure guys are negative before they come in. They're not letting them leave. And we've already seen guys cross the line. Like, at the end of the day, basketball players don't like being told what to do. At the end of the day, 18 to 22-year-old football players on campus are not going to stay in their dorm on Saturday night. They're going to walk across campus and try to do what they do. So we've already seen universities that are having up to 7% of positive tests and just their athletes that are back on campus. When you introduce the student populations back, it's not if, it's when and how severe you're going to have an explosion of this. People have to understand the nature of a pandemic states that once it left Wuhan, everybody was going to get it unless there's a vaccine. You can't control it, which is why everybody was up in arms. So the 6 feet of distance and the mask were designed to do one thing and one thing only, and that was flatten the curve, to buy time, to not overburden the healthcare system. It wasn't to prevent you from getting it. It was to slow the adoption rate so that the people that did get it could get treated. And then when the next round got it, they could get treated. The next round got it, they could get treated. You can't prevent something that spreads this easily. Now, luckily for a lot of us in my demographic, it's a very contagious disease that doesn't have a lot of teeth. It attacks weak host bodies, which is why people in retirement homes that have pre-existing conditions are quite a bit more at risk. And most young people are asymptomatic, which means they can spread it, but they don't feel it and know that they have it, which makes it spread so much easier until it can find the weak and pick those off. But that still is a very serious situation, and is why schools are trying to justify playing because of the economics, and they're hoping that they can dodge those bullets because of the populations that they deal with, but they're not going to be able to.
Well, I'm going to put you on a hot seat real quick because I am a diabetic. I have pre-existing conditions. Where do you stand on it? Football this year, yay or nay? Hard answer.
Here's the deal. If keeping players safe is actually the priority, then football shouldn't be played on any level by anybody until at least next year, period.
Right.
Period.
Okay.
Well, AT, I appreciate your time today, man. This is a very enlightening show that's gone in a lot of directions. And I think the insight you brought at the end was very valuable and powerful for people to listen to. Renaissance, man. I can't wait for your book to come out because I'm going to read that damn thing. Just make sure you change names to protect the innocent.
Don't change it. Get us all. I'm single. I'm all right. So
whatever OG's advice is, you have to go against it because he just wants to see the drama.
What happened in Siegfried Hall stays in Siegfried Hall, boys.
Fantastic. So anyway, love you, AT, man. Appreciate your time today. We out.
Appreciate it, brother. Thank you.
Now for a little bit of Al Green.
You got it right this time. Stop saying the name of the sample, man. You're going to get us sued.
Do you think it's me that's going to make them know the thing of that song?
Yes.
You know where I'm coming from. We are no longer live. Now, gentlemen, I hate to say this, but I got a couple text messages. Let me stop the recording.